No, no todo, solo una parte. La presentación será en inglés y la conversación en español. So the presentation will be in English and the conversation in Spanish.
Okay. You will answer or interpret. Okay.
Yes. This is Mary Ann Olsen. We're in an exercise class together, and I found out she was an author when her latest book was published. And she'll tell you more about herself.
Well, I typed a synopsis on the book. I have typed several, one for the publishers in California, and then I decided, well, let's do one a little bit different, because I am going to Barnes and Noble in a couple of weeks. I've been to Barnes and Noble last year on my other book that's over here it's a children's book called Little Cousin's Birthdays. So it's over there, and you can see that, but there's only one left. Nothing ever hurt friends or family. First, I wish to thank Denise and her husband for hosting the event in their studio. I would have loved to have had her on the Apple Blossom Publicity and Promotion Committee when I was executive director. My husband Fred deserves a lot of credit for his patience and understanding. And some nights I didn't come to bed till 2:30 in the morning because I was still on talking to California. They did a Zoom on the correction. I had a page, they had the same page, and we corrected it that way. It was quite an ordeal. I had never done anything quite that large. Over the years, the reason I wrote the book, over the years I've heard so many things about women being mistreated, families, wives, children, and I didn't like what I was hearing, but I was hearing more and more of it on the news and hearing complaints from people. So that's why I did the book. And I wanted to give several people credit, but they're not here. And in the story, Terry, the main character, has had enough of her husband's drunkenness and abuse from him. And she has had it, says that's enough. She takes her little boy, she walks out the door, gets in the car, and starts to drive. And she's driving in the pouring rain. And the little boy is on the back seat with his little dog half asleep. And so she keeps on driving, and they finally get to a place, and he wakes up and he says, "Mommy, I'm hungry." So she pulls off the road, and it goes into a detail about them getting something to eat. But they're on their way south. And south, if you've never been on south of 95, at Myrtle Beach, you can't miss it. There's all these signs everywhere along the highway. So she says, "Well, where should we go?" And he says, "Mom, why don't we go to Myrtle Beach? I love the beach." So in the story, her determination is to let this child grow up with a loving heart and kindness. And he wasn't getting that with his father. So she goes on to Myrtle Beach, and she runs into some people that are very, very nice and good for her, and she was lucky to do that. She gets a job as a real estate agent, which she was a real estate agent in Virginia. So she becomes a real estate agent in Myrtle Beach. Well, while she was at the beach, she and her little boy started walking on the beach, and she wasn't thinking. All of a sudden she realized he wasn't with her, and she turned around, and he's over there with a man and a big black dog. So she gets upset and runs over there, and she says, "I told you not to go near a dog you didn't know." And well, she meets the gentleman who owns a restaurant and if you've never been in the area, you're not going to be familiar with the name Myrtle's Inlet, which is down in Myrtle, off of Myrtle Beach. The inlet has a lot of nice restaurants. So he owns a restaurant down there, and he said he was sorry he hoped he didn't upset her too much, and would they have come to dinner on him. So all this developed slowly over say 3 months in the book. And she also she and her little boy meet a gentleman on the pier. And the man on the pier is so nice to her little boy, and he shows him how to reel in a fish and take the fish off the hook. And he's an elderly gentleman, and he is so very nice to them. And they run into him one morning at breakfast. There's a cafe on the pier, and they ate there. And he was sitting at another table, and she invited him over to eat with them. And he was telling them that his wife died about 6 months ago, and he was very, very lonely in this big, big house. So they got to be more or less friends, and they were running into each other at the pier, and the little boy gets to fish with him. And that's, personally, it is a very interesting area. And Georgetown is another area where you can go take your sailboat and go down to Georgetown. And she was determined very much to have a new life with her son. And like I said before, she was lucky to run into the right people. Later in the story, the elderly gentleman offers them, says, I'm living alone in this big house. Why don't you? She's looking for an apartment, and he's offering her a place to stay with the little boy. And she doesn't know what to do. She wants to make the right choice. So finally, she says, okay, we will do it. For 6 months only, we'll try this. And that's what they did. And the book goes on, and this gentleman that she had met on the beach, that develops into romance between the two of them. And he's struggling with his wife, wanting to take his little girl. She came down without telling him and brought the little girl, and his wife has the same problem her husband had, the drinking. And she says, she wanted him to keep the little girl for just while she's gone to Europe, because she had been invited to go on this trip. He says, if I keep her for that, I'm going to keep her permanently. And Melanie, which is her name, says, I need two days to decide. So that's all he gave her, just 2 days. And then I want you out of here, he said, because he didn't want to be around her anymore. And this went on, and several things happened. And so Melanie took off to Europe and left the little girl, and he gets her enrolled in the ABC beginners education, and her little boy is also in that. And they become closer and closer each time that they meet. And he is so nice to her, and he takes her out on his boat several times. And he decides that he's going to propose to her. And he does at the end of the book. And I will tell you several things that she has to endure several bumps in the road to get there. And some of them are quite hairy, with her husband coming down and trying to find her car, and found the car and traced her down. And then he got the little boy out when they were out having a birthday party for the little boy. The little boy wanted to try his new fresh fishing pole out. He went down to fish with this Mr. Mason that had offered him a place to stay, and his dad was down there, and they didn't know it. And he grabbed the little boy, and it was quite an ordeal, and they had to call police and go through all of this. And they wound up taking him in, and she is very, very upset. So she takes her time trying to get her feet back on the ground with all this. And her husband, they warned him not to do this. They were going to watch him. But they also warned her to get a lawyer, because she took the little boy out of the state of Virginia into South Carolina, which she said she was. And her friend that she had met earlier, Trent was his name, he set up little get-together for them to go out of the city, go to Georgetown, which is a very historical area down here, and eat at this restaurant. But he had flowers delivered to the restaurant. He had someone play the violin when they got in the door. So he had planned to ask her to marry him. And he got down on his knee with the diamond and asked her, and it all turns out very well in the end. But she really does go through quite a lot trying to get to that point. So basically, that's the story of Beach Escape. Now, I have two other books out there. One is called Little Cousin's Birthdays, and the Little Cousins book came about because of my grandchildren. There were two. One of them lived in this area, and the other one lived up in Winchester in the mountains. But they had a special bond, and they wanted to get together every birthday. They couldn't be away from each other on their birthday. So I had a friend at church who was quite an artist, a very good artist. And I talked to him about it. I said, Dick, I need somebody to do the drawings for this book. He says, give me your book and let me see what I can do. So he worked with it for quite a while, and the drawings were wonderful. I had people from all over the United States call and ask me who did those drawings. And he has since passed away. But he was such a sweet gentleman, and he did a marvelous job on that. And I've had now another publishing company is asked to reproduce that book only in paperback, because they feel that a paperback would sell more than the hardbacks. The hardbacks, that publishing company wanted $25 a hardback, and that's a little much for a family or a mother to spend on maybe 3 or 4 books. So this paperback will be much less, and this company in Wyoming is doing that. They call me every week telling me how they're getting along. I said, it's all you asked for this. But he was a member of the Washington, D.C. Police Department, and he was the first sketch artist all over this country. He was the first one that did sketching for, like a criminal or something. You come in and you tell me what that criminal looks, or try to tell me what that criminal looks like. And he did all that. But that was way, way back. And like I say, he's deceased now. That book received a 5-star rating from Amazon. And that's a pretty good rating. Now, the first book, My Apple Blossom Times, I wrote when I came back from Myrtle Beach after being down there 4 years, and I knew the area very well. But I came back to Winchester because I missed my children, and I missed doing things with them. So I thought about this. Nobody had ever written a book on a festival, and it was like 90 years old, that festival. So I thought, I should probably do this because I was with them 20 years. First as a secretary and naturettes, as you can see all of my scrapbook here. But I was taken to Washington, D.C. to be on TV for them, and I worked in the office for them, and I had so much dancing when there was a superintendent of schools that wrote the pageants, and he wrote them and he said, okay, this class does this dance and this class does some other dance, and that's all he did. But he did do the introductions, which was also in poetry. And I thought, darn, I can do this. And I begged them to let me try it. So I went to all the high schools around and several of the elementary schools and taught different dances for the pageant, the outdoor pageant. It was on 100 steps of the school. And it was very, very involved. And I had to be there, I had to have recordings. And I started typing this book at the Lord Fairfax Community College because I didn't have a computer yet at home. So I used their computers. So I did this the hard way. And I thought, okay. And I knew the editor of the local paper, and he had written a book on history. And I thought, well, he'd be a good person to help me, guide me through this, and help me put things in the right place. And I have an awful lot of information on the festival and a lot of pictures, as you're welcome to see here. This is their 100th year in Apple Blossom in Winchester. And they'll be selling, I don't know whether it's the end of April or the 1st of May, but it usually is one or the other. And my director at that time, that was over me, was a gentleman who was also an East Coast rep for MGM, Metro Golden Mayor. And he would bring celebrities to our festival. And later, he took me to work on some of these movie premieres. One was Around the World Under the Sea, Pretty Maids in a Row with Rock Hudson, and Shoes of the Fisherman. So I worked on all of those with him. And then he brought celebrities in like Van Johnson, Lucille Ball, and let me see, I had a couple others. Elizabeth Taylor, and then there was Harry Byrd, who was a local. He is from Winchester. He was Senator Byrd, and he every once in a while would call me and he said, "Mary Ann, come over and talk to me about Apple Blossom. Who do you want this year?" So, who do you want? I want whoever you can get. So we had two presidents from our festival. One was Lucy Baines Johnson, and her father, Lyndon Johnson, crowned her. And then another queen was Susan Ford, Gerald Ford's daughter. I don't know if any of you all are familiar with these people. And she was knighted by Bob Hope. Now, Bob Hope was there in 42, and this year, no, 49, and he came another year in 75, back again, because Senator Byrd invited him. I got to meet Bob Hope, and all he said, "Nice to meet you. Harry, get this parade on the road." So that's his answer to it. But it was most exciting to meet Billy Graham. He accepted our invitation to come and be Grand Marshal for the festival one year. And we met him. I have pictures with Elizabeth Taylor, and I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Bosley from Happy Days. I met him. I have pictures with him and Sonny Jurgensen, a former Redskin quarterback. And I must not leave out Mickey Mouse. Disney sent Mickey Mouse. But Mickey Mouse had to have a place to go to take his head off every 45 minutes. Take the head off and breathe. And there was these and Colonel Sanders was an interest. I met him in an airport when I was out at Indianapolis, and I told our president, who was with me, the president of the festival, I said, "I'm asking him to our festival." "Oh, Mary Ann, you're not going over there and involved him." "Yes, I am." So I went right over there and invited him, and he came. And Colonel Sanders was not a young man. And I said, "You know, if you don't want to walk down all those 100 steps of the school to be introduced, we can bring you right around the corner of the platform and you introduce you." He says, "No, I'm going to walk down like everybody else." So he insisted that he walk down there. And Dottie West, who was a country music person, I don't know if you're familiar with that, with her or not. I'm not too familiar with country music like I am a lot of other singers. Now the pageants I did, going back to the pageants I did and the outdoor musicals. I was pageant director for 6 years, and each year had a theme. The biggest one we did was that love makes the world go round. And I went to all spots in the world, and we did dances from many, many countries. And we had, that year there were 1,400 people in that show. And we had people on walkie-talkies to get them in and out like as quick as they're supposed to, because you were reading so much of the poetry that they had to be in place, by those 4 lines or those 8 lines. But most visitors and media were interested in the Fireman's Parade. Our Fireman's Parade, which is fire trucks mostly in some bands, is the biggest in the United States. And the Grand Feature Parade is about 3 hours, 4 hours long, has 50 floats and about 100 bands. And most people enjoy going also to the music concerts and dances, and there are special banquets and celebrations and competitions. And our festival was also part of the International Festivals Association, which was festivals all over the United States. And I went to a lot of those, and we had meetings in Atlanta, Seattle, Louisville, Indianapolis, and in Hawaii was the big one. And we all went to Hawaii, and that year we had, our festival had a coin that had Johnny Appleseed on it, and I gave that coin to the mayor, the governor. What is his name? What is it? Ariyoshi. He's Japanese. He was the governor of Hawaii. So I got to give the governor no other festival gave me anything, but it was very, very interesting. And that was on that book, and that's that little book that was here a while ago. Yeah, this little book. This book, I called the library, and they don't have it anymore. And she said the best place to try to find any more of them, I only have 2 of these left, are used bookstores. So I started calling the used bookstores. And the guy says, we no sooner get these in and they're gone. I said, I'm coming up Easter. If you get any in, save them for me. And he said he would. So that's what we plan to do. And Fred didn't know that I planned to go to the used bookstore, but I am. But I think, as for me, I was just as excited. The celebrities, I had met many celebrities prior to this. For me, we had a little Navajo Indian band come all the way from Tuba City, Arizona, to the festival on school buses. And you know how far that can be, and I know how far it is, and that isn't fun on a school bus, I'm sure. I went out to the park to meet them special and welcome them to our city, and they were tickled. They were so sweet, but they got warm marching in our parade. They got very warm. Now, I'm glad to answer anything you would like to know about this. I also have copies that I made. This is on my poem, one of my poems that's going to be in my new book. Walking Through Life in Poetry and Special Thoughts. And this is, I've won an award in the International Library of Poetry in Owings Mill, Maryland. I was one of the 33 poems selected for CD, and it was called The Sound of Poetry. And this is the poem. In my time up,
may I pass them out so they
yes.
can see it?
If you would like one,
yeah.
I ran enough off. This is the poem I wrote that got the award. And the reason I wrote it, I built a house overlooking the mountain up in Winchester, at North Mountain. And so this is what I wrote. In the evening after work is done, my porch is my retreat. Like in the theater, I have reserved a front and center seat. The majestic mountain is my panoramic screen to view. I enjoy God's special gift to me with each sunset anew. My old rocking chair brings tranquility and peace to me as I watch God's handiwork and sip a relaxing cup of tea. From pink to orange, the shades of colors change before my eye. Clouds transform, moving closer to the mountain nearby. In a fleeting moment, my train of thought is broken while beasts fly by, in formation, not a word is spoken. I only hear their honking as the mountain meets the sunset, and a peaceful calm comes over me of a scene I won't forget. So, I condensed this as much as I could do. I didn't want to keep you all for too long. So I condensed it as much the art teacher at the school. I'm going to see if any of the children would be interested in doing sketches beside like a poem, just a little sketch. And I'll give them a little money for each sketch that they do. Their names will be in the book and everything. So that's what my plan is. It'll probably be a year before it gets done. It took a whole year for Beach Escape, considering everything in California and dealing with back and forth and mistakes and things that were there. I had to get a hold of them.
It's very good. I would be happy to help you with that too. I can find, I do illustration for books and, you know, for Denise poems and.
Well, the illustration they did, like you saw that.
Yeah.
That's what California did. The first time they sent me back an illustration with a little boy with blonde hair, I said, oh God, no. I said, you can't do that. Because the book says, right in the book, it says, his dark hair bouncing up and down on his shoulders as he ran across, like ran on the beach. I said, you gotta change that. So he changed that. Then I had to change the car, which it was supposed to be a convertible, but I said, okay, just make it a new car. And, you know, you get to a point, you have to deal the best way you can.
Oh yeah, another thing is that I have been working on couple production for dancing. And I read this story about your production, your musicals. I would like to eventually, you know, talk about that.
Here's some copies of things that, here's a Dolly Parton when she came to their festival. She had a poster.
Go look in her book.
Yeah, oh, that's.
Yeah.
Can we look at your?
Oh, you all are welcome to look at the book. This is my scrapbook from Apple Blossom. And it starts with me as a teenager, and it goes all the way through. Lots of things. And I was going to give it to the library in Winchester, and my son says, no, you're not. I want that book. So, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But
Wow.
Beach Escape, that's a fiction.
it's fiction, part of it. I pulled
We've
from.
got a garden variety example of a world.
Pardon?